Jean. Great
Hello.
to see you.
How are you?
Nan, I don't know if you can see us. Cecile, good to see you too. Okay, so if you want to be on video, you can. If you want to be on audio, you can. It's all good. That's it. Okay, I think I know most people, whoever I don't know. Nice to see you, Rabbi Newfield over here. And we are at part 7 of 7. Thank you all for whoever's been here throughout. Thank you for being here. It's always an interesting thing to finish off a course. This course really should be the 49 part course. I mean, if you're trying to explore creation, wow, not 49, maybe 499. Hi, Monica. Great to see you. Great to see you.
Managed to get them to put me on. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. So, we could have gone on this forever, but I tried to make it meaningful in terms of on each day have something which I thought maybe some people haven't explored or some people haven't really thought about. Today we're going to do Shabbat in a different way. It's not going to be such an intellectual talk because Shabbat, I mean, there is intellectualism when you go into the Jewish laws of Shabbat, etc., etc. Whoever knows what I'm talking about, davar she'eino mitkaven, psik reisha, suffix psik reisha, all these types of words. And it can really be very intellectual, and some people love that. But I think the essence of Shabbat is more an experiential thing. It's one of those things that when you've been keeping Shabbat for a while, you kind of just feel it. I mean, any Jewish person, I think, who's grown up in the average traditional home in South Africa has been blessed with understanding the appreciation of what Shabbat is. So this is more enlightening, hopefully, just in terms of deriving some type of emotion of one of these 7 stories that I'm about to share. And maybe you can take home and think about and explore in your own way to make this Shabbat more special. I think we missed the Shabbat project by a month. So maybe this Shabbat will be our own Shabbat project. Okay. It says in Exodus chapter 16, verse 29, Lo yetze ish mimkomo bayom hashvi'i. A person should not leave his place on the 7th day. That's what the Bible says. Now, what does this mean, he shall not leave his place? I mean, obviously, he and she is synonymous. I mean, whoever it is, you're not meant to leave your place. So the rabbis of the Talmud suggested, I mean, this is a big argument in the Talmud how to understand this. But the one opinion, like the Maimonides, suggests that this is telling you that you should not leave your city. So when it says don't leave your place on the 7th day, don't go on a walk, from Cape Town to Gordons Bay. If you want to walk within your town, and again, within your town, where does the border exactly end? It's hard to say in Cape Town because it's one big metropolitan area. But for example, in San Diego, you can drive for 60 miles in San Diego at 65 miles an hour and still be in the same city. But at a certain point, there's going to be the last house. And from then on, there's nothing for the next 20 minutes until the next town. So if you're at that edge of San Diego called Oceanside, it means don't walk a certain amount. Some people I think say it's like 11 kilometers or 2,000 amot, however you understand that. Don't go beyond that. There was a Jewish movement in the 1700s started by someone called Anan. It was either Anan the first or Anan the second, called the Karaite movement. And they're still around today. There's something like 50,000 Karaite Jews in the world, mostly in Israel. There's some in America, but mostly in Israel. And they differ from, mainstream Judaism today. When I say mainstream, I'm talking about Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform. All together is mainstream versus Karaite Judaism. And they had a different suggestion way back when. They suggested that to not leave your place on Shabbat means don't leave your house on Shabbat. So they assume forget about walking out of the city, don't leave your house. I read up a little bit about this just to see if it's true that the Karaites, I was always taught that that's what they thought, but I went onto a few Karaite websites. So this is from a website called KaraiteInsights.com. And there the author wanted to say that he knows some people who interpret this verse to mean, don't even get out of bed. The person stays in their bed the whole of Shabbat. Imagine, they wake up, they go to sleep, they wake up, because it says, don't leave your place on the seventh day. But generally speaking, the Karaites understood it to mean, don't leave your house. Why am I telling you all the story? Because it reminds me of a story that happened to me in Alaska. So I was unmarried. I was traveling Alaska on my own. I had rented a car. And I was looking for a place to stay for Shabbat. Now, I wasn't your classic backpacker. We're talking about a backpacker here. I mean, I had a car, so I wasn't like hitching. I had my own car. I rented a car. But I literally came from mainland with my cholent pot, with my candlesticks, with my everything ready to literally make a cholent for myself for Shabbos in Alaska, wherever I would be staying. I had the vegetables, I had the knives, I had the pans to cook, everything that I schlepped, I had to schlep myself. Because, wherever I'm going, I obviously have to cook on my own. I have to bring all the kosher stuff, etc., etc. So I bought all equipped. And when I go on these travels, I like to arrive at my accommodation on Shabbat, Erev Shabbat, many hours before, at least 2-3 hours before, so that I've got time to cook and prepare, etc., etc., etc. Little did I know that particular Shabbat, it's the first time I'm in Alaska, that particular Shabbat is the biggest Shabbat of the year. It's the salmon run. Now, the salmon run is, I don't know, you have like 3 million salmon or like 1 million salmon, however many million salmon, going against the river, going back into wherever they came from. And it's like a fisherman's dream. People from around the world, fishermen come. Every hotel has been sold out for 6 months on that weekend. I went to every hotel in Anchorage. Every hotel along the way, I could not find anywhere. I just decided to drive. I drove it was a 4-hour drive. I drove for 4 hours. I must have stopped off at 15 hostels, hotels, inns, motels, nothing. Now Shabbat's coming soon. So I'm thinking to myself, what can I do? I don't have a tent. What am I going to do? Am I going to knock on someone's door and tell them I'm a religious Jew? Can I live in your house for the Shabbat? So I'll tell you what my thought was. My thought was, the Karaites always had thought that Shabbat is about staying in your house and not leaving. Maybe this is my one Shabbat in my life, to live Shabbat according to the Karaite tradition and not move for the Shabbat. I'm going to stay in my car for the whole of Shabbat. So then I started thinking, okay, where am I going to park my car? So, I don't want to leave it in the city. So I was going to find a natural park somewhere, completely in nature, park my car, leave my window open so that I could get out and go to the bathroom and then come back in. But then I thought to myself, what about, I'll mute everybody. Then I said, what about the grizzly bears? What happens if a grizzly bear finds me in the middle of nowhere? I've got a window open, and what am I going to do? Am I going to use the electricity to switch it on, to switch the car on, to turn the window up, turn the window down? What am I going to do? It's like, oy vey, what am I going to do? I said, I don't have a choice. I'm going to leave the window open. But thank God, before I found my nature park, there was one broken down house, which there was the only house on the whole road. I mean, there's nothing, there's no town, there's no nothing. It's just a broken down house. And it said Inn, I-N-N. And I knocked on the door. So one guy came to the door and I said, excuse me, do you have any rooms? He said, sorry, we're under construction. There's no rooms. I said, can you help me? I'm looking for a place to stay. I've been driving for 4 hours. There's nowhere to stay. He said, well, you can stay in my roommate's room downstairs. It's a big mess. He hasn't been here for 6 weeks. But if you want to stay there, I'll charge you for it. You can stay there and it's not a problem. I said, thank you, sir, so much. I'll take it. And, I was a little bit shemzach, which means I was a little bit like, embarrassed to ask him, can I light candles in the room? Can I have a cholent pot in the room? Can I leave it on for 24 hours? But, if I didn't do that, I've got no food. So I said to him, I've got a very weird thing to ask you, sir. And the guy was younger than me. I mean, he was 25 or something. I said to him, I know this sounds weird, but I'd like to light candles in the room and leave a slow cooker on for 24 hours for religious reasons. Is that going to be a problem? And he said, are you Jewish? So I said, yes, I am. He goes, I've already been through this last week, because last week 5 Lubavitch people came and did exactly the same thing as you. Couldn't believe my ears. It was such a funny thing. And he was telling me how the 5 Lubavitches last week also couldn't find a place. And they also found this inn, and they asked him to go to the glacier lake, and he took them, and then they all took off their clothes and jumped naked into it, which obviously they were doing a mikveh, but he just thought that they were crazy. And that was my experience in Alaska. It was quite interesting, the story with this man, this 25-year-old man. He had just been given $3 million by an insurance claim that he made because he had an operation that went wrong, and he lost, I think, 3% of his brain capacity. And he just got paid out, and he bought this inn, and he was redoing it, and that's what it was his dream, to live in Alaska. So it was me, this person who, he was okay, but he had lost a little bit of his brain capacity, and an Inuit Eskimo who was also renting the back room. That's who I spent Shabbat in Alaska with, and they ate my cholent. So my cholent has been eaten by an Inuit Eskimo and a person who is retired at the age of 25 in Alaska. Okay, that's story number 1. Bottom line is, you're allowed to leave your city. Just make sure that you prepare. Okay. Number 2. Pirkei Avot says in chapter 4, Ben Zoma says, who is the rich person? The person who is content with what he has. Now, when you think of this statement, being content with what you have, if you take the extremes, there's 2 ways to interpret this. One way to interpret is, you're content with the little that you have because you could have none, or you're content with what you have because you can't have more. Those are the extremes. So I'll tell you 2 stories of the extremes with my Shabbos observance that, shed light on hospitality. One is, let's start off with who is content, the one with what you have because you could have had nothing. I arrived when I was 20 years old as a traveler in Vienna. And I went, and I found a place to stay at a hostel, but I was hoping that I could get an invite to a Jewish person for Shabbos. So what do? You go to the kosher bakery and you try and see, is anyone there who's Jewish that can try and help you? Besides for the fact that you want food because you haven't eaten, the whole day of traveling from wherever you're coming from. So I go to the kosher bakery. I remember it was about 2 p.m. It was closing. It was almost closing. It was about 2 p.m. and it was winter. So I think the Shabbos was at about 4:30. And I said, I'm hoping, I go in, can I have like a challah and a this and a that? They go, yeah, you can. Here you go. And I'm like, I'm waiting for someone to ask me, like, who are you? Where are you from? Da-da-da-da. No one asked me. So I was a little bit bummed, and I said to myself, okay, I'm just going to go home and get the challah, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And as I leave the bakery, this short man comes up to me, a religious-looking man, beard, hat, comes up to me, and he says, excuse me, who are you? I said, I'm from South Africa, I'm getting some kosher food. He says, where are you for Shabbos? So I don't have anywhere to go. He's like, you coming to me for Shabbos, both tonight and tomorrow for lunch. I go, thank you so much. What a blessing, Hashem. Can't believe it. Last minute, you always do this. Thank you. Meet me at this place this time. So I go and meet him at this place this time. Turns out this rabbi is smuggling Iranian Jews out of Iran to the United States. He's already smuggled 3,000 Iranian Jews to the United States, and he's smuggling them through this, place in Vienna. And he's the head of this little community. And I walk into this shul, and it's all poor Iranian Jews who are, you can see that they're poor because they're all eating in a chadar ochel. It's like a kibbutz eating. It's like someone's cooking big meals and they're all eating the same meals together. You can see they all know each other. Some of them have been there for 2 months in Vienna. Some of them have been for 6 months. They're all trying to get to the United States. And I remember, he said to me, but you're going to come with me for the meal. And we go up to his, upstairs in the building, and the staircase is filthy, and the paint is coming off, and it smells, and it's a terrible building. It's not a Jewish building. Everyone lives there. And I get up to, the 4th or the 5th floor where he lives, and I enter an apartment that is the size of, I'd say a studio, except it's a 1-bedroom. And he's got a kid, just him, his wife, and a kid. And he says Kiddush, and the meal for Friday night was challah, a can of tuna, and a tomato. That was Friday night dinner. That's it. No soup, no dessert, no nothing. Tuna, a tomato, that. Come here tomorrow for lunch. I'm like, okay, I'll come. I go the next day. I can't remember what the lunch was, but it was very similar. Very, very simple. Very poor. Very, very poor. And I remember leaving that person on the Saturday lunch, feeling so special, so content that somebody had opened up their house to me for 2 meals where they can only afford tuna and a tomato. And they still shared that with me. Now, obviously, I was starving, but I still felt content because just by the virtue of this human being that's the biggest tzaddik, one of the tzaddikim on this world, I could not believe that to me was a 10 out of 10 of hospitality. Now let's go to the other story, which is, what does it mean to be content with what you have? Because you can't get any more. So that same trip of traveling Europe, I traveled for, I think, close to 2 months. I arrive in Rome, and this is on a Wednesday night, and I met up with some people from New Zealand that I'd met in Israel in my year in Israel in Yeshiva after high school. And I happened to bump into them. Let me take that back. I did not know them, but I saw them wearing kippot. So I went up to them like, shalom, Turns out that they knew people that I knew from my year in Israel. And that's how I think we traveled for maybe an hour or 2 in Rome. I said, where are you guys for Shabbat? They say, we called up the synagogue and we're all going to this one family, all 4 of us. I said, do you think it's okay if I come with? They go, yeah, normally when you're having 4 people, 5 people, what's the difference? And my South African kind of like anxiety told me, well, what happens if, they got asked and they didn't really want to have 4, but they said, okay, because how can we let these people know? And now adding a 5th, should I, shouldn't I? So I tried to get another meal, but I couldn't. And eventually I just said, I'm going to meet them and go to synagogue with them and just be the 5th, the 5th thing in the wheel. I forget the expression, 5th spoke in the wheel. So I arrived there. There was no parents there, but the son, who was 10 years old, came to the synagogue and he said, "Are you the guests?" "Yes, we're the guests, come with us." We walked for about 15 minutes from the main shul in Rome, and we got to a building which was like a Trump Tower kind of building, you know. No politics involved here, but I'm just saying it was a beautiful, beautiful building. And then we go up and we walk up 1 stairs, 2 stairs, 6 stairs, we get to the penthouse. And we go, and there's only one door on the level, and they have the whole penthouse of this massive building. I mean, it must be a 7-bedroom apartment overlooking Rome in a fancy neighborhood. Immaculate, immaculate. And we come sit down to the meal, and the, what do you call, I don't know, the steward, you know, the person wearing the, you know, the waistcoat tied up to here with the tie and the hanky over the hand. I've never had that in my life growing up in South Africa. Comes, "Sir, here is your hors d'oeuvre." And he gives you an hors d'oeuvre. This is after washing, etc. Kind of looks like biltong, except it's a very cuisine fish that they dry in Rome. And I've never tasted this. I didn't like it, but they, you know, cuisine. And I had cuisine. It was a meal, you know, it was a meal the same as you would get in like the best South African cook family, except it was served as if you were, you know, multi-millionaires. And I was blown away by this, but that wasn't what blew away that experience for me. What blew away that experience for me was at the end of the meal, the mother came up to us in broken English and said, "I understand that you're traveling and that you're kosher. And I understand it might be difficult to always find kosher food," which is actually not a problem in Rome, but she said that anyway. "If you want to come and collect food during the week, just call my cook, tell him what you want, and just come and collect it. And don't be embarrassed because I won't even know that you called." That is what she said to us. Now, I didn't take upon that, but the New Zealanders did. The New Zealanders literally called the cook during the week, said we want chops, and came and collected, or whatever they asked for. Unbelievable. And I would say that was also a 10 out of 10 in hospitality, where you're content because you can't get more. And the reason I'm sharing those 2 Shabbat stories is because both of them were 10 out of 10. Hospitality is not determined by how much money or how much you can afford, but it's about how you make the guest feel when he or she leaves your house. And I felt like a 10 out of 10 in both. Okay, next story. It says in Psalms, famous Psalms, we said at every Jewish wedding, chapter 137, verse 5. Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yamini. If I forget you, Jerusalem, may my right hand wither. Sometimes they translate it as forget her cunning. The Radak, the famous commentary on the Tanakh, says, why the right hand? Because it's talking about music and musicians, and you play your music, your kinnor, with your right hand, like a harp. You play it with your right hand, or your guitar, or your violin, whichever one it is. So Radak understands that if you forget Jerusalem, it's as if you're forgetting the music in your life. You know, Jerusalem provides you with the essence, the music in the air of your life. If you forget that, your right hand that plays the music won't have its purpose. The Malbim, and I'm quoting the Malbim, also a famous commentary, says, if I am rejoicing in worldly success, Jerusalem should be above it all. There's no doubt about it that Jews for centuries and centuries, millennia, have dreamed of being able to see Jerusalem with their own eyes. Many people have died over Jerusalem, wishing for Jerusalem. We live in a society now that we can be in Jerusalem. That introduction is important for this next story. I'll leave his name anonymous, even though obviously I know his name and he's well known in Jerusalem. I went to this man, and he lives very close to the Western Wall. He is a very, very, well-off man, and he has a beautiful, beautiful apartment. And I got to him because I know, my family knows him there. So we were eating at him for Friday night. And he said to us at the beginning of the meal, if a group of Israelis come in the middle of the meal, you're going to have to excuse me for about 20, 30 minutes because I invite the Israeli tour groups to come to be with me on Friday nights. So I said to him, why do what's the deal? How does this happen? So he told me the story. So the story goes is this Mr. A was sitting at his Shabbos table, because he lives in Jerusalem, sitting at his Shabbos table with, guests, etc., etc. And he sees people coming to his window one day. And there's just these eyes popping up at the window, many, many faces looking in. So he says, that's a bit strange. So he comes to the door. And he opens up the door and he sees that there's 50 people outside his apartment. And he says, can I ask you what's going on here? So the tour operator comes up to him and says, excuse me, sir. I just wanted to show the group what a Shabbat table looks like in Jerusalem. So he says, come on in. So they go, what do you mean? He said, I'm inviting you all in. Come in right now. So they all come in. And turns out this is a group from the north of Israel. Non-religious, what in Israel you call them chiloni, secular Israelis, who don't keep Shabbat particularly wherever they're coming from, but they are on a tour of Israel, of Jerusalem. And he says, oh, where are you going? Turns out that the tour operator, this is a Jewish group from the north of Israel, on a tour on Shabbat. They don't take them to the old city and the Western Wall because it's too political. Okay? That's what they told Mr. A. Mr. A got so upset. He said, this is not a political thing. Jerusalem, the old city, the Western Wall, has been a dream of the Jewish people for millennia. I will invite your group for dinner. How many groups do you have a year? We've got 15 groups of 50 or 60 a year. I will invite your groups every time for a meal on condition that you take them to the old city. That is what happened. Now that group operator, they go to his house, and then I was at that dinner with that group. Now they don't come in for dinner, they come in for dessert. And they witness what a Shabbat table looks like. And the reason I'm telling that story is because it was so sad to Mr. A that people who are Israeli won't visit the Western Wall because they think it's too political. And thankfully, there are people like Mr. A who are saying, it's not about left or right or whatever. It's about just appreciating the Jewish history and heritage that we have. That was an amazing story just to see that a person can open his house up to 60 people on the spot. Okay, next story. Word Shabbat means rest. It could mean passive rest. It could mean active rest. Well, passive rest literally means just, lazing off, not doing anything. Maybe sleeping, maybe reading, not breaking a sweat. Active rest, that's a little bit of a harder thing to understand. In the word v'shamru, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, to do the Shabbat. In the beginning of the Torah, chapter 1, end of chapter 1, it says, and God, asher bara Elokim la'asot, that God made the Sabbath to do. It's a little bit weird, that word to do as an infinitive. It's generally understood that active rest means you have to prepare for the 6 days for the Sabbath. You don't have a Shabbat without preparation or work of 6 days. You're meant to be involved in the world for the 6 days. And you set aside that day of rest for your rest. Every human being deserves a rest. I can't say which Shabbat of my life is the most restful. But I'll tell you one where I feel that active and passive came together for me. In the Himalayas in Nepal, on the Annapurna trek. Now, the Annapurna trek is a 24-day trek. It's a 24-day hike. And I did it, well, it's anywhere from 21 to 24. I think I did it in close to a month. And one reason for that is because Shabbat was my day of rest. Imagine you're climbing with 12 kilograms or 15 kilos. I think I got 12 kilos on my back, walking every day between 4 and 8 hours a day, climbing some serious elevation in the highest mountains in the world. Annapurna has 3 of the top 10 highest mountains in the world just on it. Annapurna like 1, 2, and 3. And this is the mountains that you're looking at. And on that day of rest in Annapurna, when your body can't move anymore, that is when you understand that you've worked for that Shabbat. You deserve that Shabbat, and you can enjoy that Shabbat. And I can tell you, if anyone ever has the blessing to have the time to be able to be in a place like that, where, you know, it's just you and mountains, and that's it. And the wind, if it's a windy day. It's an amazing experience to just feel what that Shabbat feels like, that la asot, you've worked for it. 2 more stories. The Talmud says in Shabbat, page 104a, that if you take the word emet, which means truth, the letter aleph has 2 little, stands at the bottom of it. If you actually see the structure of the letter aleph, it's got 2 things that it's standing on. The mem as well and the taf as well. But if you take the word sheker, which means falsehood, all the letters only stand on 1 point. That's where the Talmud says that truth endures, whereas falsehood will just, be wiped away in the long run. Why am I saying this story? Because there is a tradition that when you eat on Shabbat, some people have a minhag of saying, Lichvod Shabbos Kodesh, meaning at that first bite of the chicken soup or the matzah ball or whatever you're eating, you say, I'm eating this to honor the Sabbath day. It's an ancient tradition that people do. I've seen it around the world, people using this. You don't have to do it, but some people say for that first bite, Lichvod Shabbat Kodesh. But the Kotzker Rebbe, who was a Rebbe in, Poland, or Ukraine, wherever he was, I'm not sure, but he was a Hasidic Rebbe. And he was known to be very fond of, not very fond, he was very meticulous in being truthful. And he would teach his disciples that when they came to eat at his table on Shabbat, he would not say, Lichvod Shabbos Kodesh. He would say, Lichvod ha-beten sheli, to honor my tummy. Because he wasn't just doing it for the Sabbath, he was doing it so that he enjoyed his food. He was meticulous in truth. And how could he say it was only for Shabbat when he was also doing it because he loves it? So I was listening to a lecture about this idea of the Kotzker Rebbe. And I got invited to a Rosh Yeshiva in Jerusalem for Shabbat, for dinner. And I'm at his table. And, I guess there's multiple guests and etc. And I guess my mind's kind of like dreaming and just watching and seeing what's going on. And the Rebbitzin says, Lichvod Shabbos Kodesh. And I naturally just said, Lichvod ha-beten sheli, meaning she said to honor the Sabbath, and I said to honor my tummy. And, she got very, very upset with me. She thought I was mocking her. And the Rosh Hashiva thought I was mocking her, and et cetera, et cetera. And I felt very, very scum, as you say in South Africa, very embarrassed. But I wasn't really trying to mock her. It just came out without even thinking. It's just a funny story. I always remember that time of how I mocked the Rebbitzin of this famous Rosh Hashiva, even though I didn't really intend to do it. But the moral of the story is, Lichvod ha-beten sheli, it's okay to be truthful and it's okay to enjoy your matzah ball soup. Okay, and final story of Shabbos is, Shabbat is called a Brit. Le Brit Olam, Beini B'nei Yisrael, a covenant between us and our Creator. And another way of expressing that was made by Ashitsky Ginsburg, Achad Ha'am, who said, more than the Jews have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jews. Now let me see how much time I have left. 4 minutes. Okay, let's see if I can do the story. So I was working in San Diego in business, and I had about a 40-minute drive on a Friday afternoon back to where I was living, downtown San Diego. And it's a rushed thing. You know, I leave work at, 4:30 or something, 4. Shabbos comes in at 6:15 or something, and I still got to get home, shower, cook, to make it all in time before Shabbat. So I'm single at this time. So for 40 minutes, I'm driving, and in those 40 minutes, I'm thinking, as soon as I get in the door, I put water in this pot, switch it on, do this, put the shower on, so that every minute is calculated, that I know exactly what I'm doing, so that I don't run out of minutes. So I go and everything, I arrive home, and as I arrive into my complex, my next door neighbor, his name is Josh, he's not Jewish. Josh says to me, I go, Josh, I haven't seen you in a few days, how are you? He goes, Ryan, I'm so good. My girlfriend's coming to visit me from Texas. I haven't seen her in like 6 weeks. Please don't interrupt with me and her this weekend. Don't even knock on my door. Like nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Sure, Josh, you enjoy yourself. Don't worry about me. So I walk into my building, 40 minutes. I do everything that I can do. Everything. I'm going to run out of time. We might have to stop this, do the story another time. Okay, anyway, bottom line is I leave the fire on. I leave the fire on the flame. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't knock on Josh now to ask him to help me to put on the flame. I've already lit my Shabbos candles. What am I going to do? I decided to ask a beggar for dinner so that the beggar could be my Shabbos goy, so to speak, and switch off my fire. But the beggars themselves in San Diego refused to come to my house. And, they swore at me, et cetera, even though I was inviting them for dinner because they were probably on drugs or something. I found another person in the street and I asked him, will you help me in my apartment? He looked at me, he saw my kippah. He said, not only will I not help you, I hope no one else helps you. The 2 people I asked, beggars and this one person in the street, no one was helping me. I didn't know what to do. I walked back into my building trying to think what to do. Josh just walked in as I was talking about, and I managed to invite Josh into my apartment for a glass of wine, him and his girlfriend. I brought them into the kitchen. I said, do you notice anything different? He said, I think I know what you mean. And he managed to switch off the fire. And that's why if you make an effort for Shabbat, which I definitely did that Shabbat makes an effort for you. And that's how I managed to switch off my fire in downtown San Diego, even though it took me like about 2 hours to do it. Thank you everyone for being here. I hope that you enjoyed the stories of Shabbat. I hope that you can remember one of them or maybe one element of one of them so that it can make your days of rest more meaningful, because that's bottom line what it's about, trying to connect to our Creator, connecting to the idea of Hashem has given us rest so that we can actually enjoy this world that we're in. Thank you all for being here. Shabbat Shalom. God bless.